Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jackie Coogan. I'm a member of the Massachusetts Parent Teachers Association Board of Directors, and I'm the chairperson of the Health, Safety, and Wellness Committee. Before we begin, I would like to explain the logistics of tonight's webinar. First of all audio and video will be muted. Secondly, during the program itself, you will only be visibly seeing the panelist. You may ask questions and answers with the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. This is where you will type in your questions in the Q&A session. Will be at the end of the presentation for about 15, no more than 20 minutes. All questions will be fielded from the Q&A box and asked on your behalf by President Madison Estes and past President and Chair of Bylaws, Stephanie Gray. You may use the chat box at the bottom to chat with one another in the attendees, but most importantly, to tell us or ask us about any technical issues. However, all questions, I want to remind you of this, should be typed in the Q&A box. They are the questions that will be fielded first. So let's start the program. Welcome, everybody. I am so happy to have you joining us for this evening webinar, Managing Screen Time for More Meaningful Living and Learning During COVID and Beyond. The Massachusetts PTA believes that all Massachusetts children and families should be safe and live in an environment that promotes health, well-being, confidence, and security. It is because of this belief and mission that we bring this program to you this evening. Managing screen time is a troublesome piece of our children, youth, and students' lives, coupled with this devastating pandemic, is a catastrophe. You know that COVID and too much screen time are both harmful and dangerous. We must educate ourselves on ensuring that our children and families reach a balance with all of this screen time. We must advocate to end these problems. We have just the people here to help us get educated and advocate about all of this. First, I want to thank and introduce to you our new president of Massachusetts PTA, Madison Estes. Madison?
Thanks so much, Jackie. And I just wanted to thank all of you again and echo what Jackie said for attending this webinar. We have a fabulous program planned and we're really excited to share it with you. So as she mentioned, please use the Q&A. We'll be happy to get those questions answered. Chat, say hello, tell us where you're from, and enjoy. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you, Madison. We are thrilled tonight to have the Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood and the Children's Screen Time Action Network collaborating with us, the Massachusetts PTA. Tonight we have as this evening's panel moderator, Jean Rogers, the Director of Children's Screen Time Action Network at Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood. Thank you, Jean. Thank you to all of you. Jean, would you like to begin now? And thanks again.
Thanks so much, Jackie and Madison, for acknowledging that screen time is a topic that deeply impacts the health, safety, and wellness of all our children, and for having our team here from the Action Network to share our experience and practical solutions with your audience tonight. I'd like to introduce the three power women in the work of children's screen use who are with us tonight. First, Dr. Criscillia Benford. She's an educator, researcher, and a member of the Action Network Advisory Board. Her research centers around digital media and human attention, revealing the powerful use of persuasive design that influences our behavior and cognition. And believe me, your eyes will be open when you hear what Chrissy has to say this evening. Emily Cherkin is the screen time consultant. Tonight, you'll benefit from her combined experience as a middle school teacher, a parent educator, and a fierce advocate for reducing screens in the Seattle schools. Emily's approach is warm, direct, and funny, and we all need to be able to discuss this hot topic without judgment. Emily helps us to achieve balance. And last but definitely not least, Lisa Cline. Lisa is a leader in our Screens in Schools work group at the network. She's the editor of our Teach Over Tech blog and a parent in the Montgomery County, Maryland School District, where she has fiercely advocated for limited and purposeful use of technology in education. She has chaired the Montgomery County Council of PTA's Safe Technology Committee, where she's been instrumental in getting data privacy protections put in place for the district's 160,000 students. Welcome, Chrissy, Emily, and Lisa. So Chrissy, I'm going to ask you to start us off tonight. Parents and teachers in our audience are like most of us. They have a vague idea about how screens are impacting kids and also about the benefits, especially now during the pandemic, but we don't really know all the terminology. Can you start us off by explaining what do we really mean by EdTech?
Sure. And I will get my slides going here. It'll help. I'm going to go ahead and skip that slide for now, and I'll come back to it. I'll start with the question. So what is EdTech? So to answer that question, I'm going to start by saying that EdTech is different from just digital technology in general. So a lot of students right now are being taught through video conferencing technology like Zoom or Blue Jeans or Microsoft Teams. There's many out there, and that is not EdTech. What EdTech is technology created by the EdTech industry, which serves the education market through a variety of products. So some of it is, mediates communication. Some of it manages the students. Some of it algorithmically generates reports. Some of it is just hardware and software. But I want to talk about the software EdTech. An example that is very popular right now that you might be familiar with is Prodigy, which is a math game that a game that is supposed to, as the kids play it, teach math. So that's one kind of EdTech. Another kind of EdTech that you might be familiar with is Google Classrooms, which is one that is mediating the communication, it's extracting and accepting data, and it's also helping to manage the students. Now, the thing about EdTech is it is meant to be very it's meant to be helpful. It's meant to be a one-stop. A lot of this EdTech is meant to be a one-stop place where, if you want to do math, you practice on Prodigy. If you want to have all of your assignments in one place, you go to Google Classrooms. Now, I want to talk about something very specific about when EdTech, like say Prodigy, uses a technique called gamification. And when gamification meets another term from the EdTech industry, personalized learning. And this is when EdTech becomes, in my view, especially problematic. And this is because personalized learning is not all it's cracked up to be. On the one hand, it is discussed in industry literature as being something like this, being able to have a tailored educational experience. When in fact, what's really happening is the student is instead of being personalized to the individual student, really the student is fit into a profile where it is students who are something like each other. And so you have this sort of more of a cookie cutter experience that's happening with the EdTech. And that is obviously inferior to what an individual teacher could do interacting with an individual student. But that is not even really the problem as I see it. The problem is that that kind of cookie cutter interaction with the students is driven by the same insights that drive these kinds of slot machines. And in this sense, gamified, personalized EdTech is very much like a lot of social media platforms like Facebook or Instagram, Snapchat. And there's a phrase that Tristan Harris, the founder for the Center for Humane Technology, uses that I really like when he talks about gamified platforms. He says that they turn your phone or whatever technology the gamified platform sits on into a slot machine, a pocket-sized slot machine. And this is what happens with gamified EdTech. And that's because the gamified EdTech uses what is called a variable reward schedule, much like these slot machines here. And you'll get, I'm sorry, I'm a little, I'm rattled by today's events. And so I find myself not getting distracted by my own thoughts. But you'll find that this kind of gamification will appeal to survival instincts. It will appeal to all sorts of things that do not, that get in the way of learning. And the thing about a variable reward schedule is that it is orchestrating the release of dopamine. Now, dopamine is extremely important to learning, but when, and it's key to goal-directed behavior. And the reason is because it's motivating us to make associations between our actions and the outcome. So in real life, that's a natural process. But when you are on a gamified platform, those associations are being managed. So I am going to leave that there, and I'm open to questions. You can ask me more about that in the Q&A session. But the real problem with gamified learning is that in multiple research studies, it has been found to decrease intrinsic motivation and to make students who use these platforms unhappy. Oh gosh, I'm really sorry. Yes, so it is found to make students unhappy. And I want to, now I'm going to return to this story, and I think this is probably going to help me regain my focus. But this story comes from a long time ago when I first left graduate school and had my first full-time teaching job. And I was changing contexts, from one university to another university, had very, very different kind of students. And I was teaching a class that had been handed to me that I hadn't designed myself. And I was finding that I was having a hard time connecting with the students. And I've been thinking a lot about this moment as I've been empathizing with parents who still have children in school. My kids are older, so I am not at home helping them with their online learning. But this idea, for me, I was thinking about this moment where I was having trouble reaching my students and feeling like everything that I knew about teaching wasn't working anymore. And I thought for myself, I need to re-experience what it's like to be a student. So I took up tennis. I decided I'm going to take up something that I'm not good at. Never in my life have I ever had good eye-hand coordination. I've never been good at any ball sports. So tennis was, it seemed like a good choice. So there I'm in my tennis class and I'm working with the tennis pro, and I was terrible. Like, he would serve the ball and I would miss it. And so anyone who's good at ball sports will already know the advice that he gave me, the first bit of advice that he gave me, which was, I notice that you look at me when I'm getting ready to serve. And then when you see the balls coming, you look at your hands and you look at your feet. And that's why you miss the ball, because you need to follow the ball all the way over to you. You need to keep your eye on the ball. And I was like, oh, okay. So go again. I'm keeping my eye on the ball, but now I'm very tense and I'm still missing the ball. And then he said, okay, well, the other thing you need to do is trust yourself, keep your eye on the ball, and then trust your body just to hit the ball, and you'll be all right. Take it nice and easy. So I was like, okay. And I couldn't do it. So the way that I finally learned how to play tennis was that he kept reminding me every time he would serve the ball, he would say, nice and easy. And I would keep it nice and easy. And then we could hit the ball back and forth, and then I could play tennis. And so the reason that I'm telling this story is that for me in this time, I think for parents and students, the ball is intrinsic motivation, and that there are so many learning opportunities all, in life. Life is filled with learning opportunities, and staying nice and easy, which is very hard, but strangely enough, but staying nice and easy about that, remembering that what's important is the intrinsic motivation for learning, the love of learning. And so that whatever happens during this next, year, your child will be able to catch up with that love of learning and the intrinsic motivation intact. That's what will happen. I am absolutely confident of it, based on my 20 years plus of teaching students, that this is the most important thing. And so I am going to close my prepared remarks with that note.
Sorry, I was having a little trouble unmuting. Thank you so much, Chrissy. I was thinking as you were talking how important it is for what I tell parents when I'm talking to them one-on-one is think about the long haul here. I'm sure we're all going to think about that in our comments tonight. But with intrinsic motivation, it means so much to what that child is going to be like as an adult. Are they going to be able to get a job? Are they going to be able to function in social situations? It means so much more than just today's learning adventure. And I think you really explained it well, to be able to take us from, what's being sold to us and what we think might be cool for today, or might be, giving them certain rewards, to what is this child going to, what kind of motivations will they have as an adult? So fantastic overview. Thanks for getting us started. And Emily, I think we'll go to you next. Chrissy's given us a great overview and a great foundation as well to start. Can you talk to us about what's happening on the ground with families and EdTech? What's happening to their relationships? What's happening to the kids as they progress?
Great. Thank you, Jean, and thank you, Chrissy. Can you see? Oh, I guess I should present. Can you see my slides okay there?
Yes.
So my name is Emily Cherkin, and I'm the screen time consultant, but I also am a mom, and I'm a former educator myself. I spent 12 years teaching middle school, and I secretly love 7th graders. Not many people feel that way, but I ironically this year have a 7th grader. And so this is not the way I expected his 7th grade year to go at all. So it's been a lot of reconciling of my own experience as a teacher with my mom head and brain and my screen time expertise to try to find balance. And it's been hard. And this is my daughter. And this was taken this spring when we first went into lockdown. And of course, she has opinions about having her picture taken. And we talk a lot about asking permission for pictures, but she did allow me to use this one. And one of the things I noticed really early on in the pandemic, and my daughter herself actually has been homeschooled prior to the pandemic, just a few months. So we were sort of going into it unexpectedly prepared in some ways. And so she hadn't ever had to do Zoom calls until the pandemic began, and her homeschool program went on. She goes 2 days a week. And the very first week, she came running up the stairs after one class and she's like, Mom, I figured out how to hack Zoom. And I was like, oh, that's not a good thing. So I'm going to stay real calm and just sort of ask you to explain a little bit more, like what happened here, because she was only 8. And she said, I just figured out you just type in a random meeting ID number and hit begin until you get one. And I will point out, since the spring, Zoom has added a lot of security controls to prevent this very thing. And what was so astonishing to me was that a kid who'd never had to navigate Zoom learned it within 2 or 3 hours of class time over a week-long period. And one of the things I hear a lot from parents is, oh, my kids need tech now to learn it later. It's it's so important to build these skills. And that was proof to me that it is so user-friendly that not only could she figure out how to do it, but she figured out how to hack it too. And to my knowledge, she did not. So please don't report me. The other thing I want to say is just philosophically, I know we have a lot on our mind right now, and this is, it's strange. It's good distraction to talk about this because I love talking about this. I think one of the things that I find when we talk about screen time issues is how defensive people get, or how sort of excuse filled we become. Oh, it's not that bad, or my kid doesn't do this, or well, he has to do it for that. And I just want to say that one really great strategy for approaching conversations about screen time is to really think about being tech intentional. And that's a phrase I use all the time because I really don't want to convey the message that I'm anti-technology. Obviously, look at what we're doing right now using all forms of technology. And I'm over in Seattle and people are all over the country and we can do this. But I really think there is a benefit if we can replace that initial judgment with curiosity. And that's a quote I also love to use all the time too. So just to begin with that little story and premise of kind of how I come to my work and the philosophy that I bring. So I guess slide advance, here we go. Oh, I think this is not supposed to say back to school. I pulled up my old version of this page. My apologies, but that's okay because I'm going to replace judgment with curiosity and wonder why I accidentally pulled up the wrong slide and not judge myself for it. Because also another really great thing as educators and parents is modeling, and that we make mistakes sometimes, and that's normal. And all we need to do is own them and say, oops. So oops, sorry about that. But the first thing I really want to talk about is sort of how things have changed. That our childhood looks really different from what our children are experiencing. And that was pre-pandemic, that was true. One of my favorite researchers to talk about is Dr. Doug Gentile, who has done a lot of research on what he calls the displacement hypothesis, which is this idea that if our children are spending a lot of time engaging with screens, it's time they're not spending engaging in other activities that we know and have research to back are what really matter for healthy and optimal child development. So it's probably not hard for you to think of somebody in your own life who might spend less time outside or less time reading a book or less time pre-pandemic hanging out with friends because a screen has pulled them inside or has kept them on longer. And of course, we also know that screens can disrupt other things like sleep and socializing and all of those kinds of things. So Dr. Gentile did this research where he looked back at sort of how many hours a week were kids spending in free time, that when we were kids, go out and play in the neighborhood, run around with the kids, that kind of thing, versus today. And what he found probably isn't surprising, but back in the 1950s, children had about 68 hours a week of free, unscheduled time. And again, the research on play and the benefits of play is huge and vast. And of course, that's a struggle too when we think about how things have changed within the classroom and the school building, you know, decreasing recess, taking the play kitchens out of kindergarten, pushing early reading. All of those things are displacing what we know to be really effective for helping kids develop optimally. So of course, by 2010 and later, the number of hours per week for those same experiences that we had in our childhood has dropped to just about 14 hours. And I would argue, unfortunately, and my prediction is that's even worse now with all of the need for screens to use for remote learning and to socialize and all of that. But the biggest takeaway from his research was that setting limits matters and that adults matter. And whether you are a parent or a teacher, you can talk about these topics and you can set limits. And I will tell you right now, your children will resist them, and that's developmentally normal. And one of the tricky parts of that is I think parents get so worn out and run down from the arguing. I mean, that's what I hear all the time is parents reaching out. I'm just so tired of the stress that comes with screen time arguments. And while setting limits is incredibly important and effective, the other thing to really know is that there are really important skills that need to happen before we can expect children to manage their own screen time. And, you know, certainly a teenager's experience is gonna be really different than a 6-year-old. But what I always like to talk about too is, again, this idea of skills before screens. And in this case, we're talking a lot about executive function skills, which is really like the part it's in the prefrontal cortex of our brains, like the front part of our brain. It's one of the last parts of our brains to fully develop, not often until we're well into our 20s. And that's kind of amazing to me because that means we're constantly getting better and working at these skills from day one well into young adulthood. And those are skills, these executive function skills are things like time management, emotion regulation, planning, organization. And as a former 7th grade teacher, I will tell you that the number one thing that middle school is about is executive function skills, because it's when those kids are just all over the map. I mean, we know the kids who completely lose everything in their backpacks. We know the kids who don't remember that you told them the vocabulary test was Friday, even though you wrote it on the board and they wrote it on their planner. Of course, that's another problem. They don't use planners anymore. Different problem. But really to focus on emphasizing skill development before we hand over the screen. So there's a huge benefit as parents and as educators to think about the skills before the screens. Sometimes, and I use this with a big caveat, and I would reference the EdTech triangle at everyschool.org as a great resource for helping assess some of these types of technology as a tool. But I would say more often than not, the skills or the screens displace the skill building opportunities. And especially for younger children, there is much less need for a screen to teach a skill. So an example I always like to talk about is this idea of, you know, well, certainly Minecraft is quite popular. And I have heard it argued to me that, well, my children are learning how to build. They're building structures and stacking and building blocks. And as any preschool teacher or brain researcher knows, 3D tactile block building has a completely different impact on the way our brains work than 2-dimensional touching on a flat screen. So it isn't the same thing. It might be building a skill, but it isn't the same skill as building in real life, in real time with that tactile learning. So one of the things that so yes, prioritizing skills before screens is another really great strategy. And when it comes to how we do this, because that's an important thing too, is I like to use this phrase, live your life out loud. And what this means is really, it's just parental and adult modeling of the way we want tech to look in our lives. So in the classroom, it might be, you know, an emphasis, and this ties back into the skills before screens, rather than telling our students we can look up on Schoology or Google Classroom what the homework assignment is, we encourage the use of a paper planner or a calendar so that they can visually track it, but also, and again, think about all of the 3-dimensionality of a paper planner and the tactile use of writing up with a pencil and a pen and putting it to paper and the slower speed at which we process it. The number of kids who tell me, I don't need to write my homework down, I can look it up on Schoology has gone. I don't ever hear a kid say, oh, let me pull out my planner anymore. And I maybe that's my old school thing, but man, I'm a big fan of planners. So living your life out loud might be asking students to do that, but it could also be as a parent, you know, saying, oh my gosh, today was an unprecedented day in United States history, and I have been glued to my phone. I apologize, but I need you to know that I'm here, I'm paying attention, and I'm going to just be checking back in and out. And if you have a question, I'll be available. that's owning that right now. That's what parents are doing. That's the first thing I said to my daughter today when I picked her up. It was like, this is the reality today, and I'm happy to answer questions, but that's probably why we're really going to be distracted tonight. So that can be that, and it can be big and complex, but it can be really simple too, because we want our kids to understand that our phones and our devices are used for really a wide variety of things. So it could be, I'm looking to see a map of how do we get from A to B. I'm going to look at a recipe so I know what to cook for dinner. Then our children know our devices are for much more than just looking at the internet or watching a video. And I, again, back to that replacing judgment with curiosity and being, owning our mistakes. Tell them when you're bored and distracted, because then they know, oh, technology can be boring and distracting for parents too, or for teachers too. And that is so valuable. We want to give kids the vocabulary and the experiences, the narrative experiences, to be able to talk about the way technology impacts them. And I know that right now, the world is a little chaotic, and remote learning, as Chrissy said, this is the devices are the medium through which we're communicating with our teachers and each other. And I would not ask parents to not do that. I understand the need for it now, but I think if there are ways that we can look in our own lives to either focus on that displacement piece, right? Like what are they doing other things? Are they being outside? And also prioritizing those skills before screens. And of course, to continue living your life out loud. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emily. I love that concept of living your life out loud, because it reminds me of something that, a concept that actually disturbs me, but it can be a trap, which is that screens are not messy. They're clean. I mean, they're quiet, especially with headphones or earbuds or things. And so it can appear that we've sort of appeased our kids, or we've made our life easier because it's so quiet. And there's no Legos to climb over, and there's no mess with finger paints or whatever. But what I say to parents is just eat dinner with the Play-Doh on the table. Just walk over those Legos and get, your foot hurt a little bit, because it goes by so fast. I mean, Chrissy and I know my kids are in their 20s now, and you wish you had that time back. The mess doesn't last for very long, and
messy play builds brains. That's all. That's like the fundamental truth. Messy play.
You bet, exactly. Builds brains, builds character. They can help clean up the mess as well and build responsibility. There's so many levels to it. So Lisa, now we've had a really great overview sort of on the corporate and theoretical level from Chrissy, and what's going on in the home from Emily. What can we do about it? What ideas do you have that can help us to use tech in a positive way, to create, not just consume? And what can we do to advocate?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I feel like the timing tonight is really good for a pep talk, because we are all pretty worn out. I was just jotting down all these roles that I have had for the last 9 months. And I congratulate you all on promotions as well. You are probably now teacher, principal, financial planner, entertainment committee, chief dog walker, short order chef. It's so much. And then we're supposed to be great role models, pleasant, it's a lot, and take care of people when we ourselves are terrified. So I'm going to walk you through my spiel. And this is something that I would give to kids, my own included, just to remind us about why we care about this topic. Let me do screen share and show off my technical skills. Here we go. Can you all see that? Okay, so we have the academic side of the house covered. I'm going to go to some action items. Now what? What do we do with all this great information that we hear from experts like you've just heard from Chrissy and Emily, and the Today Show segments that we see, and the podcasts that people send us? So what do we do? how do I advance here? Here we go. So my first piece of advice is to believe the facts. We do tend to want to brush them off because it's not pleasant, but here are the facts. A third of American adults say they are online almost constantly. And I think we have to confess that that is true for many of us. We can justify it many ways, but this is what our children are seeing us do. And this is how they are becoming grown-ups, thinking that this is normal. Teenagers who spend 3 hours a day or more on devices are 35% more likely to have risk factors for suicide. This is an old statistic. I sure know that communities are seeing different numbers right now. I don't have to go very deep into this because it gets dark quickly. And then social media use is correlated with self-harm and all kinds of physical and mental ailments. So we have to believe what we read and process that and really hold on to it. Social media. I mean, this is page 1 of about 5 pages of bad apps. It's probably dated as well. And I'm sure there's some new ones that I don't have on here. There are things like calculator that you would never question, but are in fact social media sites where predators hang out. WhatsApp, check your kids' phones is what I'm trying to say. Snapchat, there's actually something on Snapchat called Snap Map that shows where kids are. If they have their Snapchat on, there's a mapping tool that predators can use to find out where they are if they're walking home from school, which is not the case right now for many kids. But nevertheless, keep your eye on these things. Everything that is done online could come back to bite you. And this is true for adults. It's certainly true for children. The anecdote is so fresh in my mind is I have an attorney friend who does privacy law, and he represents families within our county here whose children have been rejected from college. And one most recent one is a Clemson University student. He was ready to go. He'd been accepted. He got a full scholarship. The school called 2 weeks before he was going to go and revoked everything because someone had sent a picture of him drinking at a party. It was a picture from Facebook. So really good to remind your kids that you know they're a good kid, but they might do dumb things. If they don't do dumb things, I'm not even sure that they are normal. We've all been that age, and it just is part of life. And then, of course, there's these guys. So this is a ring of creeps that were in operation down here in the mid-Atlantic, Virginia and Maryland. These are real people. And, you know, this is just one batch of them that got caught fishing for young teenage girls and luring one and doing some devastating harm to her. So if you're saying to yourself, well, I can protect my kids, I read the privacy policies and I'm making smart choices. And well, you know what? Privacy policies, if you were to read every privacy policy, look how many hours a year you would be reading privacy policies. 200 years. I don't have that kind of time, and I know you folks don't either. So let's be real. If the privacy policy says anything about sharing data, information, location, URL, name, address, back away fast. So what do? My MO is to de-screen and not deprive, especially now. If you find Minecraft to be something that is enjoyable for your child and he or she can pull away from it, make your own decision there, of course. If you want to de-screen entirely, that is a choice. Find your value, find your set of values, work with your spouse, your partner, talk it through with your family, and just touch base with it once in a while. I know a number of people that just don't even have screens because they don't want to deal with their wrath, the arguments, all the things that Emily jumps in to solve and moderate for. And that works really well for them. And if you never have it, you never miss it. I know many people who once they give it, they can't take it back. You give a child Instagram, it's really hard to take it back because they are now woven in with, not just their own friends, but friends of friends, their sports friends, and it's just super hard to take back. But here's someone that did, and this person had a 16-year-old, and I love the things that she's saying. They replaced the child's smartphone with something called a Gab phone. And if you don't know about Gab phones, really encourage you to look into them, especially if you have, 5th, 6th, 7th graders who really badly want a phone. The Gab phone looks just like a smartphone, but it does not have internet connectivity. You can text, you can listen to music, you can take pictures, and it looks just like an iPhone. We had them in our house and actually wish we still did for many reasons, but that's a whole nother story. So this person took the 16-year-old's phone, replaced it with a Gab phone, and lo and behold, the kid became a photographer. He's taking real pictures. He's doing odd jobs in the neighborhood. He is forced to be interesting, creative, listening to music, etc. This is a really great strategy, whether it's Sundays or Tuesdays or whatever it happens to be. Pick a day and just all decide to go low tech. I think it's easier when kids are younger to go for a whole day without any tech checks, especially on Sundays. So give this some thought. It's got to be a family thing, just to say to your kids, you got to be screen free today. That's not going to fly for obvious reasons. But this graphic exists in a couple of places online. Pin it to your fridge. See what happens. And it's a goal. It may not be perfect, but it's a goal. Obviously, doing other things. If you have a bunch of kids in your family, that's great. And they can work on collaborating by making bread or doing an art project. My son was super into building and fixing bikes for the first part of the pandemic. Find some outdoor nature classes, book readings outside. It takes a little work. And if your kids get along, I'm sure it's less work, but give these things a try. I know it seems really old school and it seems a little old fashioned, but I think right now we can all use a little bit more of that. It's a good time to break out the markers and such. You probably already have heard this, but it's worth repeating. The parents in Silicon Valley are not on tech to the extent that other parts of the country are. They emphasize print books and old school toys. They postpone smartphones until high school or even, when they graduate high school. Their homes are game free. So the people that are designing this stuff for our consumption and destruction in some cases, they're not using these things. There's a really good movie, a documentary called Social Dilemma. And I do recommend that for family movie night. It shows how a lot of the people involved in creating this stuff have ran away from it once they realized how persuasively it was designed to hook you. And I know you've heard this quote before, but the CEO of Netflix, when asked what his competition was, his major competition, he said, sleep. Our major competition is sleep. We want you to continue. We want to auto feed you the next and the next and the next episode. So what about school? And this is kind of where I put my energy. How can you de-screen at home or go low tech when the kids are online all day? And right now, of course, I don't know about yours, but mine are on all day. So I really recommend advocating. A friend put this little image together about if you're concerned about EdTech at school, what do? Do you go to the school board? Do you go to your teacher? Do you go to your principal? Do you engage your PTA, the superintendent? What do you do? Well, our committee has brought in experts, and you see them kind of up in the upper, I guess, your right-hand corner. We bring these guys in to talk about what happens. So these guys are game addiction experts. And they came to our Board of Ed meeting and said, we can't detox our patients if you're going to shove Google Classroom in front of them the minute they walk in the classroom. And you're going to let them keep their cell phone in their Ugg boot, you know, and every time it vibrates, they're going to wonder who just pinged them on Instagram. You have a really good team. You're probably aware, the Center on Media and Child Health. Dr. Michael Rich is also called the Mediatrician. He's in Boston, and you know, you might want to latch onto these folks. Bring in your PTA meetings, bring in the speakers, enlighten the superintendent who has other things to do. So I'm sure he or she will appreciate the help. Lots of documentaries. I just mentioned the social media movie. Screenagers, of course, now has 2 movies out. Bring these to your PTA. Even if you get 10 people to come out for them, that's 10 more people. Get a Gab phone. Tell your friends that you got the Gab phone. Let them see it. Let the kids touch it, use it, check it out. And Wait Until 8th has been extraordinarily successful. Just encouraging kids to hang on until 8th grade to get a smartphone. This is the last shot. This is a person I know on Facebook who has some teenage kids. These kids don't use social media. And I just want you to take a look at, you know, kind of how they're having fun. They're making sugar cookies before the holidays. You know, I'm not going to judge a book by a cover, but these kids look pretty happy and interesting and like they really enjoy being with each other. And I think that's what we would all want for our kids. So I'm happy to answer questions about what I've done locally, either here and now, or you can reach me later on. But go out there and advocate, rattle the cage, and really trust your gut. If it doesn't feel right to you that your kid is doing this too much, or his or her friends are doing this too much, go with your gut. Get reconnected with how to say no and all the different ways to say no. You will never look back and say, I wish I let my kid do more social media. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Lisa. You know, that idea of de-screen, don't deprive is really, really important. I think one concept that I like to talk about is bridging. I didn't bring a slide on that tonight, but where we think about what they're doing on the screen, being able to bridge to real life. So there's a difference between learning how to cook on a screen. There are lots of great kids cooking classes, learning how to paint. I just got through doing a watercolor class, and then going off the screen and doing it versus staying on the screen to play a video game that keeps you coming back with that persuasive design that we were talking about at the beginning that Chris studies. So, and I love the idea of let friends see what you're doing. And parents need peer support. They need other parents who are raising kids the same way, and the kids need peer support. So programs like Wait Until 8th that you showed, excellent. Really, there are others as well, and you'll find some in our resources that we're going to share tonight at the end. Getting that peer support so that you can keep going and you don't feel like I'm the only one thinking this way. And you can always find us at the Children's Screen Time Action Network and access our free resources, become part of our community at screentimenetwork.org to find lots more support and ideas. So I'm thinking that we're moving to some questions.
Yes, awesome, great. So we do have one question, which it looks like Lisa answered. So I'll just share what it was for those of you if you can't see it. So someone asked, what recommendations do you have for less homework required on screens after students have been on the screen all day? And you know, they're suggesting why don't they assign, a student to read a book, paint, draw. So Lisa, I don't know if you want to kind of talk to your answer and then see if anybody else has anything to add to that question. I think that would be great.
Well, yeah, I mean, ask as a starting point. We've been asking since like 2 years ago. And when they instituted the new curriculum, they shop around for new curriculum in our county anyway. And it came down to 3 different vendors, and we wound up going with, and by we, I mean, there was like a whole work group of 200 people on this, but we all kind of decided to go with the one vendor that offered what they call consumables, which was a term I'd never heard before, but it's workbooks to complement the curriculum. So that was the one that was chosen because there was a lot of advocacy around that. So yeah, ask for it. I also just finished up today, actually, a meeting on the CIP, the budget for next year. And because of some of the advocacy that parents in my county have done, I saw a line item that we're going to recommend more budget for not just books and workbooks, but take-home kits for science classes, so you can do the experiments at home. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to pass, but it was pretty cool to see it in there. And I'm just showing you how it bubbles up if you start asking and you ask your friends to ask and you go to the board meeting. Eventually, your kids and the kids behind them might get some of these things.
That's so empowering, Lisa, to hear that story. And I know Emily has a few too. Emily, would you like to share some? When we go and advocate, it sometimes feels like we're climbing a hill. It's really difficult, but eventually these things, we chip away at them.
Okay, there we go. Yes, thank you, Jean. I like to joke that I'm an accidental activist because I didn't mean to start testifying at school board meetings, but I got so mad about how much tech was coming through the doors, and this was pre-COVID again, that I just decided to make it my thing. That's what I'm going to do. And one of the advantages of doing that is you put something on the public record, which has can have a lasting effect. Like you can circle back to it and say, I testified about this, what's happened about that. I also think it depends on the age of the kid, to Susan's question. I think for older students, it might be a little trickier. If they're online all day and then they also have homework online, I would still, as Lisa says, ask for the offline options as much as possible. For younger children, to me, it would be shocking if there was additional homework online after an 8-hour school day on Zoom. And if I were that parent, quite frankly, I would politely refuse to participate in it. And just broadly speaking, I think right now, all children are impacted by this, and there is I should be careful. There is a lot of research about homework. Much of it is limited to say there's much benefit, especially for younger children. And Chris, you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. But if there is something beneficial, it's got to be pretty specific type of homework. And I love the idea of the painting, the play, the drawing, reading a book. All of that has benefits to children. And if they're young children, I would push for that far before I would encourage screens as homework.
Another thing I'll mention very quickly is we're going to put up a resource slide. I don't know if it's time for me to do that yet, but our Screens in Schools action kit. I think I will share my screen, and hopefully we'll get the right one here. So are you guys able to see this list of resources?
Yes.
Great. So the second one here, well, the top one is, I already mentioned, we're the Children's Screen Time Action Network, and we're a coalition of practitioners, educators, advocates, and parents, all working to reduce the overuse of screens in childhood. We're not about unplugging altogether. We know what the real world is, but we're about helping you and helping ourselves to have a more balanced world. And then our Screens in School action kit and the COVID addendum to it has templates. You might be a little reluctant to advocate the way Lisa and Emily have done, and many other of our members have done, but the templates will give you the words, and you'll be able to adapt them for your own situation, for your own district, and for your own specific needs. So I think you're really going to want to check out those action kits. And they were put together by our volunteers in our Screens in Schools work group, a passionate group of professionals and parents working together to really improve the situation with schools.
Great, Jean. Thank you. We do have another question in here that's asking, statistically, we have seen that 1 in 5 students have a mental health issue, and many are related to bullying online stalking, etc. What can we do to help with this?
Go ahead, Emily.
Hi. I am very concerned about the mental health issues that are happening, generally speaking, but even more so because of the isolation of COVID. I think that is a very real concern. I think I always get a little bit, the bullying online is a thing and is something to be aware of, but it isn't the predominant, I think it can detract from some more important things to work on as parents and educators. And part of it is not so much to deny that it's a problem, but to help empower kids to know what to do when it happens. So it would be, how to ask for help, who are the trusted adults, what do you do if somebody solicits or, asks for inappropriate content or shares it. I think when we scare kids and adults into those things, then it tends to sort of drive them underground, and then the conversations around them don't happen. So I not to diminish their risk or scariness, but if we can encourage it, as opposed to sort of what's the scary part, what are the things that we can do to protect ourselves and the conversations that we need to be happening, that's really important. The mental health piece, I think, is going to be so complicated, of course, because of what's happening just sort of with the pandemic and isolation. And I think, again, making sure that every student or every child has at least one adult, trusted, safe adult that they can go to. And that was a goal when I worked in one middle school, was, do we know that every student in the school has one such adult? And it was a pretty powerful exercise to go through that and ensure that that was the case. I think it's a very important starting point. I don't know if my colleagues have other.
I just have one more observation about that. Bullying is such a sliding scale. There's the overt bullying that happens with words and pictures online. But I'm also experiencing as a parent, there's bullying if you don't have social media or a phone that is, $1,000 phone or AirPods and so I think as parents, we kind of have to prime the pump a little bit as the kids go towards that age where they're going to get hit for something, whether it's what they have or don't have, how they look, what their background is on their Zoom call, their current state of adolescence, visually, whether it's, the acne or the, facial, whatever. So I work with my son pretty early on that, saying, you're never gonna have the right sneakers. You're just not. And I never did. You're never gonna have the right haircut. Like there's going to be someone to pick on you, and just get ready for it. A friend of mine just constantly talks about resilience, and you got to teach the kids resilience. I haven't done the best job, I have to say, but at least and what I'm trying to say is it didn't prevent some of the problems, but at least it gave him the understanding that I went through it, we all go through it, it's a bit of a rite of passage. That doesn't address, the stuff at the very other end of the scale, which is quite serious in nature.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in for a moment on that. Thank you, Lisa and Emily. Really excellent comments to help us put bullying into perspective, online bullying. But we are at the Action Network, we have our work groups. We've told you about the Screens in Schools work group, but we have a new one starting. We have 4 active work groups: early childhood, mental health professionals, parent educators, and Screens in Schools. We have 2 new ones starting up, and one of them addresses this issue. It's specifically for families who have either lost a child to social media bullying or have had severe consequences. And in their grief and in their upset, they would like to help other families to prevent it from happening to other families. So if you know anyone on that end of the spectrum, or if you are called to really help people who are suffering from online bullying, it is a real thing on the other end of the spectrum that can be very dangerous. To, very good involved families, because of the way social media is designed, they talk to their kids, they're very involved, but it can get under their skin without even a trace, really. So just wanted to mention that. Don't want to end on a downer, though. I really appreciate everything that's been said. Chrissy, do you have anything else you'd like to add to this?
Just to underscore your last point, Jean, that online bullying can hurt more than in-person bullying because the platforms are leveraging our need for a sense of belonging. And the pull to belong when you're trying to belong through the platform is stronger. And so the bullying when it excludes. So and that's how it can escalate as a bad feeling quickly. And not to end on a down note, because I do think, just to go underscore what Lisa was saying, the preparing so that it's not a shock can help. Preparing your children so that some of that is not a shock can help, and so that they can feel that they can speak about it and not keep it secret.
Thanks so much, Chrissy. So we do have one more question. I know we're just a few minutes till we're about to end. So our last question that we have time for, and again, you can see the chat, Cynthia typed up all the contact information as well. So that's in there for you all if you want to contact any of these fabulous panelists. But our last question is from someone, and it says, is it known if the immediate gratification of gamification is associated long-term with drug misuse by youth? So I don't know. I think, Christy, you did talk about that a little. I don't know if you want to start, and then we can go from there. Thanks.
I don't think it's known. I don't think that link is known, but there are people who have problems with impulse control in other domains also have problems with screen use. So it's the causal effect that is not understood, but the correlation is there. So, and part of that is because these platforms light up the same parts of the brain that are lit up, when you're gambling or engage in any other kind of reward-seeking behavior. So that's how that correlation happens.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. And those with ADHD who have the prefrontal cortex, impulse control, immaturity, or the way one of the psychiatrists described it to me was the brakes are broken until the child is much more mature. Those kids definitely have a much harder time. But the good news is the same psychiatrist, Dr. Cliff Sussman, whose name I put up earlier, he said that after about 2 weeks of being off of anything that is gamifying stimulating your dopamine receptors, about 2 weeks after being off, you can return to sort of normal cognition. And that, I thought that was encouraging.
Okay, Stephanie and Madison, are there any other questions?
No, I think we've covered everything that was in our question boxes.
I think, Madison, you had one that came through the text regarding Dr. Michael Rich.
Yes, so yep, we did have one more, and how can we get in touch with Dr. Michael Rich? And does anybody know where in Boston he is? Where is
Yeah,
he?
just look up, he has a website, it's The Mediatrician, which is a play on his being a pediatrician. He's a super interesting guy. He started out as a filmmaker and then he decided to go to Harvard to get his medical degree. And he stayed in Boston and he lives in Newton. No, he doesn't. He lives in Brookline. And he's man about town on this issue. He speaks everywhere. And he has a whole clinic with researchers looking at this. And he works with children directly. So yeah, look up Mediatrician or Dr. Michael Rich. It's a Google search or DuckDuckGo, whatever you use.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much to all of the panel. I think either Stephanie or, I'm sorry, Cynthia, would you put back up the resource list, please? Or Jean, whoever has it, the resource and the contact list.
I'm not sure if that's shared. That shared my wrong screen. I'm sorry.
It's okay. We'll
I
just
think
move
I've
on.
closed
We'll
it.
just,
Yeah.
thank you, Jean. We'll just move on. I'd like to say thank you to our 3 panelists. Your information was fabulous. Jean, thank you very much as the moderator and working with us. All of these screens and all of this information will be, it's been recorded and you will be able to have access to this through our website at Massachusetts PTA, www.mass PT, I'm sorry. Well, at www.masspta.org, excuse me. So thank you to our panelists. I would like to really thank the attendees for coming tonight. I hope this was informative for you. And I really would like to thank my colleagues, the tech back team, Stephanie, Madison, and in particular, Cynthia McReynolds, who's from MMA and MCAAP. Thank you so very much. Thanks, Jeff. And now the next slide, you can see they were so informative and I hope you liked this webinar. You know that we are doing a webinar series and on the first Wednesday of February, just like the first Wednesday in January, we'll be doing the next webinar on building vaccine confidence. And I hope that you will join us. And the last one will be on March 3rd, and that's on mental health issues. I do want to just make a couple of announcements. Again, this whole webinar is being recorded and you can get access to it. And if you are a presenter, this may even be, this will be emailed to you. Also, at the close of this webinar, I'd like you to note that you will be receiving an evaluation survey. It'll be emailed to you. Please fill this out to help us. The Massachusetts PTA builds quality programs, discussions, and events by really listening carefully to your thoughts and ideas. Thank you for attending tonight's webinar. Again, please take a few minutes to complete the webinar evaluation. I'd like to wish all of you a happy and very healthy new year. We look forward to working with you and seeing you again. Take care and thanks to all.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you.